All right. So today we are going over the remaining of Acts, which gives us Acts 26 through 28, deciding to combine those because they have the same theme as the previous chapters in Acts, which gives us time to go ahead and switch over to start Revelations for the remainder of this year. With that said, I am going to go ahead and open up the floor. I'm not doing, I didn't do what is the word called? The chapter headings, because again, this is still Paul being in captivity, nor the definitions this time for the sake of time, because we have a few chapters to get through. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for Acts chapter 26 at this time.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
In Acts 26, chapter 26, Paul, who was in the custody of the Roman Empire, pleaded his case before King Agrippa and Festus, the government of Judea. Agrippa told Paul to speak for himself. Paul stretched his hand out and told the king that he was happy to speak for himself, as the Jews had accused him of blasphemy. And Paul, he was representing himself, and he also told the king that he knew Agrippa was an expert in all the questions and customs of the Jews. And Paul recounted his life, and he was a Pharisee, or a member of a very strict Jewish sect, which is a group of people, sect is. And as a younger man, because of this, he said he persecuted the followers of Jesus and had them imprisoned and even executed. He even hounded people into other cities whom he considered blasphemers, and he pursued it. And Paul told the story of when he and his companions were afflicted by the light that was brighter than the sun on the way to Damascus. And back in some of Acts 22, 23, whatever, we had talked about Paul seeing this light and it fell to the ground. And that was a light that God was trying to get his attention. And the light was so unbearable, that it was so unbearable bright that all of them fell to the ground. And he told of how he heard a voice asking why Paul then asked Saul persecuting him. And when Paul asked who the owner of the voice was, it claimed to be the voice of Jesus. And Paul told Agrippa that the voice told him to get up and go minister to the Gentiles, which Paul immediately did with the same passion with which he persecuted the followers of Jesus. And for this, Paul told the king the Jews caught him in the temple and tried to destroy him because they were trying to destroy him because they didn't want to believe or change that didn't want to accept that Jesus was the Messiah. And they discouraged him from preaching about Jesus Christ. And at that point, Festus told Paul that he was foolish, and Paul disagreed, reminding him that the king knew these things of which Paul was speaking. But Agrippa was so impressed that he told Paul that he almost made a convert out of him. And that convert is to change. And he almost, Paul almost gave his life to Christ. I mean, not Paul, Agrippa. And then Agrippa, his sister Bernice, and the governor sat privately with Paul a while, and the king told Festus that Paul could have been set free had he not appealed to Caesar. And that was all because Paul insisted to go to Rome, and it was that God had plans for for Paul. That's all it was. It was all part of God's plan. It was all part of God's plan for Paul. So that's it.
And I thank you for this. In reading this chapter, some might have said something like, it's karma. Paul got what he put out there. But when it comes to God, there is no such thing as karma, because you kind of look at people in the Bible that you think, man, they should have got it well worse than Paul, you know what I'm saying? Or even people in this world. So to lean on the idea of karma is not necessarily Christian-like, because God can do what he wanted to do. Like in this particular instance, to be honest with you, he could have just laid Paul on the spot, but instead, like you said at the end, it's all a part of God's plan. God decided to convert Paul. You know what I'm saying? Convert Paul and use Paul for his purpose. Another thing in here, which made me think, Lord, get my attention. Just like God did what he needed to do to get Paul's attention. Whatever happened in that moment completely changed Paul's life. And that's the kind of attention that I want God to the same thing I want God to do for me. Like if I'm following down my own path of thought, claiming to be righteous or doing this according to the will of God, because in a sense, Paul was, in a sense, he knew all about the laws. He was raised up in that. His thing was going against this new idea of Jesus is the Lord and Jesus raised his people from the dead. You know what I'm saying? So we can be so caught up in traditional teachings to where we're kind of like shutting out things that's real in the Bible, because we haven't taken the time to study the Bible. And that's typically what happens. Is you'll have people that have been in church for so long, but they have never really taken the time to study the Bible. So they stand strong on the traditions that they've learned, and can persecute you in a sense by holding goods from you, by slandering your name for this reason or another. And it takes God to come through and be like, no, not so. So when I say, Lord, get my attention, I'm saying, Lord, if there's a part of the Bible that I have yet to study, but I'm so strong in this particular belief because that's the way I was taught, get my attention. You know what I'm saying? Don't let me be out here, being so strong in this idea the Lord said, and the Lord ain't even said it. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same thing like that. And then the other thing I wrote on here, good. I can't even read my writing. So I am just going to go ahead. Somewhat gonna, some good, given. Oh, I know what I wrote. Yep. I wrote here, some plant, some water, but God gives the increase. And that's in pertains to the King Agrippa saying that he had almost been persuaded. You can think, Paul could have got discouraged. I don't know what Paul felt in that moment. You know what I'm saying? Because when it starts off, it lets you know that he was happy to be able to stand before Agrippa, because he figured, now this man, no. You know what I'm saying? So give me this opportunity to witness unto him. It is my desire that, now that you guys be as I am. You know what I'm saying? But when it all was said and done, Agrippa was like, you almost persuaded me. And you can get discouraged in thinking that you spent your whole life, in a sense, praying for this person, witnessing for this person, doing good by this person, and they just won't budge. And so we have to take courage in the encouragement in the thought that, hey, you just might be the planter. You might be the water. Somebody else could have planted a seed. But at the end of the day, we pray that God gets the increase. So I thank you. Certainly, for that. We'll go on to the next chapter and then allow others to give the summary for everything at the end. So the next chapter is chapter 27. Thank you so much for your study on 26.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chapter
27, and I did my study from the Contemporary English Version, and
Mhm.
the headings in my Bible were Paul is taken to Rome, the storm at sea, and the shipwreck.
Mhm.
And as I was studying and reading through, God's favor is what came to me from this chapter, and I
Mhm.
highlighted a couple verses that kind of my summary of the entire chapter. The first one was verse 3, and it's well yes, I'm sorry. The first one is verse 3, and I wrote down Paul sails with other prisoners. Sorry, I can't remember my own writing. Paul sails with other prisoners, and God favored him,
Mhm.
and the Captain Julius allowed him to visit friends so they could give him what he needed. And it started out saying that he was very kind to Paul. So that was one of the first things that I highlighted in this chapter. And then during the journey, Paul gave warnings of the dangers of ahead. And I read in my studies where it said he was an experienced sea traveler and had already been shipwrecked several times. So I read that and I said, well, he knew, you know what I mean, when he was giving them the warnings of that he saw the dangers coming, he knew because he had already been through that. And for
Mhm.
that part, verse 10 is what I highlighted. It said, then Paul spoke to the cruise ship. Men, listen to me. If we sail now, our ship and its cargo will be badly damaged and many lives will be lost. But Julius listened to the captain of the ship and its owner rather than Paul.
Mhm.
Then I wrote down a summary from it came from like verses 18 and then 21 through 26. And I put Paul is consistent with encouraging everyone on their journey and speaking about God's protection. He lets them know on several occasions that God will keep them safe and save them. He let them know God is protecting those that are with him, and he will keep them safe. And verse 18, the storm was so fierce that the next day they threw some of the ship's cargo overboard. And then down to the second part of 21 to 26, again, Paul said, you should have listened to me. If you had stayed on in Crete, you would have not had this damage and loss. But now I beg you to cheer up because you will be safe. Only the ship will be lost. I belong to God and I worship him. Last night he sent an angel to tell me, Paul, don't be afraid. You will stand trial before the emperor, and because of you, God will save the lives of everyone on the ship. Cheer up. I am sure that God will do exactly what he promised, but we will first be shipwrecked on some island. So again, he was trying to warn them and tell them based off of what the Lord spoke to him. And then down to verse 35, when it gets to this portion, they had not eaten for 14 days, so Paul encouraged them to eat to gain their strength. He thanked God for the bread and passed it out to all the passengers. And then when they had finished, they threw the remainder overboard to help lighten the load. And in verse 37, it says there were 276 people on the ship, and after everyone had eaten, they threw the cargo of wheat into the sea to make the ship lighter. And, 276, it didn't really, when it said about the bread, it didn't really say like how much bread, but I just read that and kind of took it that in my mind, I was thinking when he, broke the bread and gave thanks, I was like, I wonder if this is one of those situations where it was a small amount of bread, but he gave thanks and it was enough to feed everybody type thing. That was just, I don't know. I just thought, that. And so, and then down to verses 42 to 44, the soldiers decided to kill the prisoners to keep them from swimming away and escaping. But Captain Julius wanted to save Paul's life, and he did not let the soldiers do what they had planned. Instead, he ordered everyone who could swim to dive into the water, head for shore. Then he told the others to hold on to planks of wood or parts of the ship. At last, everyone safely reached shore. And again, I wrote down God's favor. Although the soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners, the captain wanted to save Paul's life. Through the tests and storms of life, God will favor us and send us who and what we need to help us through. We may have to go through to get through, but he is there with us every step of the way, even when it gets tough and seems like he's not. He's there with us no matter what it looks like. And that was my summary.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you certainly for that. When you had started off talking about God's favor. I was thinking about the thought of, Lord, let me not be afraid, but stand strong. Yeah, no matter what the situation is, because God's favor is God's favor. If you know that you have God's favor, it's not that you have to wake up today and wonder, do I have God's favor today? God's favor is God's favor. It's not that you have to worry about, oh, I gotta go and see so and so for this particular issue. No, you don't have to worry. His favor is his. There is a part in the Bible that kind of lets us know, don't worry about what you're gonna say or this, that, and the other. All you have to remember is that I have God's favor. No, even if the situation doesn't turn out the way that I think it's supposed to turn out at that moment, I'm still going to wait on the Lord to show up, because gosh, we have talked about it over and over again that I don't know about Paul, but I would have been tired of being presented in front of this person and that person and the other person. But where you find your strength is remembering, as Sister Teresa said at the beginning, it's all a part of God's plan, and I have God's favor. There is a song that we sing, something about, am I a soldier of the cross? Da, 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 da. If we claim to be a soldier of the cross, we know that we're going to go through things. The good thing about, as we say in our, we read it at the first of, we read it at the first month. Yes. When we come together for a purpose. Can you imagine? Imagine where you are in your walk with Christ, where it doesn't matter if you feel you're extremely strong or you're not where you're supposed to be. All I'm saying is just imagine where you are in your walk in Christ. Now imagine having tests, trials, and tribulations all day, every day, and you don't have a body of Christ to come to encourage you, to lift you up. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a chore to have to come to church, or it shouldn't be. It's a place where you go to be encouraged. It's a place where you gain brothers and sisters in Christ like this to encourage you. And I guess what I'm saying is that we have to stand on the facts and knowing that we have God's favor. Regardless of, yes, I'm going to go through all, and just like kind of like discussed in last night Bible study. I don't have my book in here because it's out in the car, but yes, you're going to go through things. You're going to go through things, but it's moments like this. It's moments where I also wrote down another scripture. I don't have the verse, but I remember it because I kind of taught the kids to remember this in Bible study. But encourage one another and build each other up. I know I have God's favor, but I also know that I'm going to have test, trials, and tribulations, So I need to get me a group of people that can encourage me through this process, or God send me somebody that's going to stand with me. Here it is where Kiki was talking about God's favor. There were people assigned to make sure that Paul was okay. Y'all knew y'all wanted those people over there, but this one right here, I will make sure he's okay. So we stand in the fact that no matter what we're going through, we have got to believe that I have God's favor. It might not look like it right now, but I know in the end, it's going to turn out all right. And again, like I said, if we look at our individual's life, think about those really tough moments where, oh my gosh, I have had enough. I can't take any more of this. And then just out of nowhere, you probably can't even put a date on it. You got relieved from that thing. God just came through again. That's his favor. We don't have to worry about where or when. We just have to remember to stand strong, to be still and know that he is God, and be not dismayed in well-doing, because Paul could have been like, you know what, you're right. I'm tired of going through this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He stood strong, so I thank you certainly for sharing what you got from 27. We'll move on to 28 at the moment. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Okay, in 28 is when they had escaped. Then they knew that the island was called, I can't pronounce that word,
Uh-huh.
Melka. I probably
Yep.
pronounced it wrong.
Perfect.
And the people was there was they showed no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us everyone, but because of the present rain and because of the cold. And then Paul gathered up a bunch of sticks and laid them on the fire. There came a vapor out of the heat and fastened on his hand. But the barbarian saw, when I said word, beast hung on to his head. They said among themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom thou escaped to see yet. Paul suffered no not to live. Paul shook his hands off the beast. The beast had hold of him, and there was no harm, because that was God out there to help him to get rid of the person that had hold of his hand. And then down here, another page, and number 6, where they should have swallowed and fell down and died suddenly, but after they had looked at great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to see if there's something else in here. But Paul didn't have no fear because God was with him. And then they say the 3 taverns whom when Paul saw, he thanked God and took his courage. And then when they came to Rome, the Censors delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guards, but Paul was suffered to dwell by himself with a soldier that kept him. So Paul was saved from whatever was the 3 days of the prison, being in prison. But I can get out of this. And there was no death. 18, it says, who they had examined me would have let me go because there was no cause of death in me.
Yep. Let me see where I am on here. Yeah. So I thank you certainly for that. When you were speaking, it made me think as Christians, we've got kind of like what we're studying in our Bible study, right? We've got to remember to be Christ-like, and that thought is birthed from the idea of Paul got bit from the snake, right? And their traditional thinking was, okay, you must have done something wrong in order for this to happen to you. But in being a Christian, we should not be looking at a person's situation and give it a label, because think about it. Think about all the things that the tests, trials, and tribulations that come your way. Does that mean that you did something wrong? We're so, and even if we know that a person did something wrong, it doesn't necessarily mean that God is punishing them. It could just be their turn in the test, trials, tribulation lane. You know what I'm saying? And so as a Christian, we've got to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And instead of labeling a person's trial, we should be praying for their situation. And so that's what we have to remember to do. Also, it said that people thought he was a god because he didn't die when the snake bit him. That's another label. We've got to, also be in the mind frame of not promoting people in our minds of where we think they should be because they overcame this, or they were able to do like in Christ. We can do those things too. We're overcomers too. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't mean that a person is greater than you. And here's a prime example where maybe once in our lives, we probably went to a person was like, it's different from when we say pray for us, but when we think that we can't get a prayer through, but only these people can pray. So I gotta get to this prayer service for, to get this prayer. No, you got the same power in prayer. It doesn't make you less, you have the same power in prayer. And then one other thing, Paul didn't have fear because God was with him. The Lord tells us, fear not. Fear not. Yes, that initial grip of fear may come, but as soon as the Holy Spirit enters it into your mind to fear not, we've got to remember who we are. Yes, sometimes we have to be reminded of who we are. I thank the Lord for the gathering of, what do we call it? Because what did Pastor say Sunday? We're the church, but the place that we go is something like the assembly. I can't remember. I'm grateful for where where we go to, when we go to worship, you know what I'm saying? I'm grateful for that because I know, as an individual, I'm the church, but I love being amongst the saints. Because, I can't talk to everybody, about this, that, and the other, but it's the same. It's not the world that encourages me to keep going. It's the saints that encourage me just to see somebody else. People have their own trials and tribulations, but to be amongst the saints and see somebody else got a smile on their face makes me say, you know what? Yep, I can get through this too. You know what I'm saying? If Sister Eva can stand in the dang on pews and sing, I can do it too. You know what I'm saying? You just find strength in other people's situation. Because God is who he is. He gives us every opportunity to not fear, to not fret, and to be of good courage. But we have got to be willing to take those attributes on to ourselves. So I thank you as well for chapter 28. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor for others who would like to give what they got from what other people have said today, or even perhaps what they got from studying these chapters. The floor is open at this time.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead. Go ahead, sister.
Okay. One of the things I'm going to go back to first, when you were talking about karma, when I hear Christians talk about karma, I cringe, because I'm like, God is in control. God, there's nothing about what God does that is karma. And one of the things that I like when we talk about Paul is that Paul in 26 it talks about how he was punishing and murdering those who believed in Jesus, and how he put them in prison. But what I like about him is that the same energy that he used to against those who were believers in Jesus, he used that same energy to spread the gospel. I think sometimes people think that when I'm in the world, I'm this way, but our personality is our personality. If you like to laugh, then you're going to still laugh as a Christian. Some people think that because I'm saved that I have to be a certain way. God still wants us to enjoy life and to have a good time. Also, all the things that Paul went through, as many have already said, it's all of God's plan, and there's always a purpose. One of the things that I wrote down was in chapter 28, where he healed Publius' father. Had Paul not gone through those things, the shipwreck and all the trials and things, he would never have been there to heal his father. So God's favor, is you can't deny it, and no one can change it. And God's plan is always going to is going to come to pass. And at the end of 28, it talks about how Paul was able, basically he was free, but he had a guard watching him, So as he's going through, these various trials, going from place to place, his situation got better because he was free as far as being able to spread the gospel. The spreading of the gospel was not stopped. It was not hindered because of what Paul was going through. And that was all part of God's plan. When I was reading the fact that at the end it talks about, that he was able to do what he was doing without hindrance, my mind went back to Acts chapter 1, verse 8, where it says, "You shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." That's all part of God's plan. Paul was in prison, but the gospel was still going forward. That's it.
And I thank you for that, to like go backwards and what you said, especially starting there. Paul, prison guards, think about prison guards here today, right? Prison guards here today, they got guns and weapons or whatever to put you in control, right? But prison guards back in that day, they had to be on something different, because ain't nowhere in the world you gonna just lock me up and hold me here and you ain't got nothing stronger than me. You know what I'm saying? So they had to have been some ruthless individuals. So it takes a ruthless individual to be able to witness to a ruthless individual. You know what I'm saying? So yes, that goes back to, God's particular plan. Another thing where you were talking about, and how, Paul was still in that situation, kind of, sort of, but as the time went by, his situation got better. And so that made me say, let us pause and think about some things that is happening in our life, or that has been happening for some time. Sometimes we can be so caught up on the woe is me and why is this happening, that we fail to pause and realize, yeah, I'm going through, but it's actually getting better. You know what I'm saying? And so I know a particular situation for myself to where I'm like, yeah, I want to be done with this. But if I pause and think about it, so I thank you for that. If I pause and think about it, I realize that it's actually getting better. And I still know that God is in control. And then at the very beginning, where you were talking about Paul using the same energy as he was before he got converted, that made me think, and this is Reverend Lund and some other people that I was paying attention to during revival night. When Reverend Lund was like at the beginning, and she was being the worship leader, and like she was just so hype and like opening up the service and stuff like that. I said to myself, I bet Reverend Lund was that girl back in the day. You know what I'm saying? And then I seen some older people in the crowd just rocking back and forth, like so hype about, the praise music. I said, oh yeah, they used to get it in. They used to get, but if you bring that same energy with you, yes, because God needs that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yes, I thank you certainly for sharing that with us. Again, the floor is open for sharing.
Okay. Well, I'll just go through some of the things that were pointed out either in my Bible study reading or, from what everybody's been talking about. And one of them was, Julius, the centurion. Like you said, he had to be a rough character because he's going to be, guarding somebody, and they had but only so much weapons. They didn't have guns. They had knives and clubs and whips and things like that. But I mean, you had to have some physical brute strength, and you had to be willing to use it. And for him to be around Paul all the time and to develop the respect for Paul, such that when the other ship people were ready to kill all the prisoners, he said, "Oh no, not Paul. You may do something with them, but not Paul." That that says that even though he's a rough character, his mind was still paying attention to what was going on. He wasn't just sitting there like some kind of, robot or a dummy. He was paying attention to where he developed that respect for Paul. so that he wanted to save his life. And, again, this is God orchestrating things to make sure that the gospel gets moved forward. But what one of my Bible study things said was, how would your character look up close and personal? And I thought about that because there are times when, you don't, okay, I don't keep a clean house all the time. There's some times when the floors may need to be vacuumed or the kitchen needs to be mopped. So there's times when I really wouldn't want someone to be up close and personal 24/7, but if you know you're going to have in-house guests, you go around and you clean everything up so that the house will look good and decent. Well, we do sort of the same thing with ourselves, with our character. When we know we're going to church, we're going to put on our best, outfit, and we're going to try to make sure we watch what we say. We're not going to use 4-letter words. We're going to clean ourselves up. But when somebody's in your house, when they're up close and personal with you, there's only so much hiding that you can do. Who you really are is going to come out some kind of way, because at some point you're going to slip up, or you're going to just be who you are. And I thought about that, and I said, there's a lot of room for improvement, because certainly there are many times when at home, I may just throw on something that I would never wear, walking out in public, or and those kinds of things are not as crucial as at home. Are you as polite with the person that you're around 24/7 as you are with the person on the street, or as you are with your coworker, or as you are when you go to church? Because if you're not, then you need to clean that up, because the person you're around 24/7 deserves the same respect. You should be the same. You really should be the same, whether someone's looking at you or not. Like they said, you should be the same in your closet as you are out in the street. So that was what was a reminder to me that, I got some work to do. I'm not done yet. And then the other thing was I liked about Paul was when it came to him having to demonstrate to the crew that God was guiding him, and therefore they should listen to him because God knew what was going on and what was going to come, instead of him trying to take credit for himself and say, I told you so, based on Paul. And so it was a reminder to me that we have to make sure we give God the credit, even though the human part of us wants to pull the credit, wants to say, well, I told you, didn't I tell you? We want to claim the credit, but we have to remember, more importantly, is to pull people into the kingdom. And it just reminded me, yesterday, I was on the phone forever with AT&T again, because I just switched from Verizon to AT&T for everything. And we went from a personal account to everything being under the business. So it was a whole lot of stuff. I was on the phone with them like an hour and a half, a couple of days ago. And even with that, they still screwed up. And we hadn't gotten, or so I thought, and we hadn't gotten the phone that was taking the place of the phone that we've had for like 20 years. And I was telling them, I need this phone because it's the phone we've had for 20 something years. That's the phone a lot of people call me on. And so it's been 5 days. We probably have a ton of messages that we haven't answered from missed calls, So I need this phone. Well, I'm glad that the whole time when all this was going on, I did not get angry, act unchristian like and all of that. Because as it turned out, it was that there was some terms and conditions thing that got as an email that I was supposed to accept, and then they could ship it. So really it wasn't their fault. It was my fault, because I hadn't read to the very end of the email to where it said, you have to accept this, otherwise we're holding the shipment. So I was like, phew, thank goodness I didn't try to go off on them and, tell them all the things about, I spent an hour and a half before and blah, blah, blah. I was glad that for once I kind of, I really felt like, okay, I have to do this as a what would Jesus do moment. And what ended up happening was at the end of this call, and this call went on for like 45 minutes. So at the end of the call, would you believe the lady whose name was Katrina, which I thought was funny, is like, yeah, she's the same name as a hurricane that we had, right? But anyway, she asked for my email address because during the time I was, during the time stuff was happening, I was making these funny comments about things like, yeah, we got to represent God, so we can't be coming, looking raggedy and stuff like that. And she started laughing, and she said I made her day. And so she wants to communicate, because she said she liked that what I was doing was incorporating my faith belief in this call, and that most of her customers are just downright irate. So it just reminded me that we're really always on display, and we have to make sure that if we're going to be out here with bumper stickers or any kind of symbolism, any symbolism that says we're a Christian, then we can't be ducking in and dodging in traffic, or doing all kinds of stuff thinking we're anonymous. We have to, we really have to recognize that we're always representing God, whether we are paying attention or not, because other people are paying attention. So, so that was why Paul, the fact that Paul made sure that the focus was on God. It wasn't about Paul predicting the future. It was that God knew what was going to happen and had made provision. And then the other thing that came up in my studies was that, that Paul, when you think about what happened for him to get to Rome, he had chains, he had shipwrecks, he had bitten by a snake that should have killed him. He had all kinds of stuff going on. And yet, Paul kept the faith. He reminded me of Joseph. Despite all the stuff that he went through, he kept the faith. He just figured no matter what it was, God was working it out. And that's the kind of attitude that, I need to make sure that I keep, is no matter how much drama I get in my life with certain people who will remain nameless, um, but I have to make sure that I recognize that despite it all, God has this all worked out, because he's not bounded by time. He knows what's coming. None of this is a surprise to him, and he's already made provision. So as long as we keep the faith, then it's going to work out. It's when we fall off, and because of the circumstances, we start veering off. We do like an Abraham. Oh, well, I don't see where I'm going to have my I'm going to get my heir, so I'm going to go off and figure out a way on my own. No, you have to wait on the Lord, because he's got it worked out. If we do it, then we start messing it up, and then he has to fix our mess, in addition to continuing to do what he had planned to do anyway. So that was the other thing, was that, just amazed at how Paul just kept the faith, just like Joseph, all the way through all the trials and tribulations, just never, ever let it, make him veer off the course or let go of God's hand, as it were. So I really like that, Paul is such an outstanding example of going through, but never, ever letting go. So that's
And
what I got from that.
I thank you for that. When you were saying that, I'm going to sing you guys. Well, the choir kind of knows the song already, but the song we practice, "Keep the Faith," which, a perfect summary to it all. No matter what Paul went through, he kept the faith, and he kept his character in God. Which made me think about, when you were talking at the beginning, we can think that behind closed doors, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, because shoot, the people I go to church with, they ain't here. But guess what? It don't matter that they ain't there, because God see it all. Can you imagine getting to heaven and God be like, yeah, remember that stuff you thought nobody saw? I saw it. Here you go, right here. You want to answer for this? You know what I'm saying? So that's why we have to remember, especially if we want the blessings of God, if we want the promises of God, we got to remember to keep his word out in public and behind closed doors, because there are areas in our lives where we ask the Lord to give us strength, but we need to also remember to ask the Lord to give us strength to where we are still that same like-minded person in him, out in public or in private, no matter who we think deserve the business. You know what I'm saying? No, we still got to, become, when you were talking about being on the phone call, it made me think about how Pastor always says, when somebody asks you, how you're doing, you don't have to be that, oh, I'm blessed and highly favored. Like, they just asking you how you doing. You know what I'm saying? Because it's those moments when we feel like we got to give them cliches all the time, when people really paying attention to see, oh, they're going to slip up at some point. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to tell anybody at my job or anywhere that I go that I'm a Christian. Normally the time I have like my necklace on that has a cross on it. You know what that means. Okay. Or just, my demeanor, you know what I'm saying? You know that there's something different about me. So people will, be respectful in front of me, or, they will ask me things in pertaining to my faith. I don't remember ever once, saying I'm a Christian and blah, blah, blah. The things on my desk, the things that, will be a reminder for you. One, because I don't want to be that person that's out there embarrassing God. Right now, first thing in the morning, I'm gonna bless you, but by the end of the day, you about to get it. No, you know what I'm saying? So yes, and then when you talked about keeping the faith, like I said, I'm going to send that song, because it's a perfect thing that, there are things that's going to come, and even in that song, it says He has worked it out before, He can work it out again. Just trust God. Just trust God. So I thank you certainly for that. Again, like this one was, of course, already predetermined that it was going to be a little bit longer. But if anybody is still on and wants to just share what they got something from hearing us all, you can at this moment. Okay. I'll say how they say at work. I'll take the silence as everybody's good. Everybody's good. So, I thank you all. So again, the next time that we have study, we will be studying Revelation, starting at chapter 1. And I'm looking forward to see what we pull from that. So with that said, I appreciate all the feedback, all the enthusiasm, all the studying, all the prayers. So thank you guys so much. And everybody go forth and have a great rest of your day. And I will talk to you all soon. Okay?
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Before we go,
Yes, I can hear you, sis.
Okay. I just wanted to ask